You might have a 1970s penny worth thousands of dollars, but only if you can spot this tiny detail that most collectors miss. Today, we're diving into one of the most confusing and potentially profitable years in the Lincoln Cent series. 1970. In order to fully understand the variety landscape for the 1970 coin, we first have to understand that 1970 was a transitional year where both large and small date coins exist side by side. Now, this is particularly applicable to the San Francisco Mint coins and are the result of two different working hubs. At first glance, they look the same, but here's how you can tell the difference in just a few seconds. The small date and large date coins are sometimes also referred to as the high and low 7 varieties, though this term has fallen somewhat out of favor in recent years. To find out which one you have, just draw an imaginary line across the top and bottom of the date. On the small date coins, the 7 is in line with the rest of the numbers, both to the top and bottom, hence the high date moniker. But on the large date coin, the 7 sits ever so slightly lower than the rest of the numbers, explaining the low 7 alternative name. So, of the two of these, the small date coin is definitely the scarcer of the two. The 9 is also a completely different design, where on the small date coin, the top curl of the 9 is pointed to the inside. But on the large date coin, the 9 is blunted here. In addition to this, the letters of Liberty are also considerably smaller on the small date coin when compared to the large date example. As an example, in recent auction results, two coins, both graded as MS67 red by PCGS, were sold. The large date example achieved a closing price of $258, whereas the small date coin, by contrast, sold for $937. And remember that the small date variety is also found on the proof coins in addition to the regular business strike examples. And in 2025, a beautiful example of the 1970s small date proof coin was sold at auction, graded by PCGS as proof 69 red deep cameo for an astonishing $8,831 by Great Collections. So be sure to check out your 1970 proof set as well. And now that you can confidently identify both the large and small date types, let's move on to the individual varieties next. And most of these will be found on the large date coins from here on out. And speaking of those proof sets, there are a few large date varieties you also would want to keep an eye out for. Starting with the first of two doubled obverse coins worth some money. And this is definitely one that is easily overlooked thanks to the hidden details, unless you know exactly what to look for. Here, the doubling presents mostly in the form of separation lines. On the date, the 0 of 1970 is usually a reliable place to look. Again, faint separation lines are what you are looking for here. Turning our attention to the letters of In God We Trust next, paying particular attention to trust, where the strongest doubling and separation lines are usually noted. The R, U, and the curves of the S are typically reliable places to spot it. The W of We is also typically notched slightly to the tips of the W. And then the letters of Liberty are also doubled, though here it displays mostly in the form of additional thickness, so it might be less obvious. The base of the L is also a good indicator here. Be particularly careful not to mistake strike doubling or mechanical doubling for actual die doubling on this issue, as it was a significant problem during this era. Here is an example of a coin that has both true doubling and severe strike doubling at the the same time. In 2025, an NGC graded example of this variety, with a grade of proof 67 red cameo, was sold at auction for the impressive amount of $703. Then we have one of the most interesting varieties for the date. Again, it is a doubled obverse variety, same as the last coin, but this time it is a large date over small date variety, with significant doubling on the date, as well as all of the letters of Liberty and In God We Trust. You can see immediately on the date that the numbers are extremely thick. This is due to the first impression being made with a small date type, and it was then impressed again using a large date type. The letters of Liberty are also extremely thick, especially when comparing it to known normal coins from the same issue. The same can then also be said for the letters of In God We Trust. But really, the date is the main point of interest for this coin. In 2022, a PCGS graded a proof 67 red cameo example of this coin was sold at auction, where it was able to fetch $3,206. And then for the final proof variety to pursue, this is a case of not doubling, but actually tripling, where evidence of 3 distinct impressions can be noted on the design elements. Here again, the doubling, or technically tripling, displays in the form of separation lines on the virtually all of the numbers and letters of the obverse of the coin. Where it is best seen though is on the date, and to a lesser extent the letters of Liberty as well. But by far the best place to spot it would be the letters of In God We Trust. As you can see here, there were clearly 3 separate impressions with distinct separation lines on each letter, and additional thickness on the letters as well. In 2024, a proof 67 red example from NGC was sold at auction by Great Collections, where it was able to raise $235 by final call. And that pretty much finishes all of the noteworthy varieties for the proof coins. So it's strictly business strike coins from here on out. And we'll start with this strange doubled obverse coin from the 1970s large date type. The doubling here is almost exclusively noted by an additional bar just below the 0 of 1970, running diagonally in a southwesterly direction, in addition to a small mark inside the 0 as well. In 2023, a PCGS graded coin like this was sold at auction by Heritage, slabbed as PCGS MS66 red for $456. And then finally, we come to the best known and by far the most impressive penny variety from 1970, the coin every collector dreams of finding. This is the 1970s large date double die obverse cent. This is definitely one of the top 10 Lincoln cent variety coins known. There is strong doubling on both the date and Liberty. But the main attraction on this coin is without any doubt the extremely wide spread that is clearly seen on the letters of In God We Trust. Every single letter is doubled without mistake to spectacular effect, all displaying towards the left, indicating their clockwise rotation during the hubbing process. During 2024, the sole finest known example of this variety, a coin graded by PCGS as MS66 plus red, was sold at the ANA signature auction by Heritage for a record-setting $38,400. Subscribe to WNN and feel free to watch the last video in this series about the 1969 varieties. For the World Numismatic News, I am Numisman saying thank you for watching, keep collecting, and have a fantastic day.